Welcome to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael G. Neese, president of Our Future is Kind, and your trusted companion as we search out kindness strategies we can use in our everyday lives. Together, as we chase the idea of building a kinder future, we will interview experts in kindness, team building, human motivation, corporate culture building, relationships, plus politicians, artists, and those with a vision for a healthy and kind future, one we all want to live in and deserve to enjoy together. In addition to interviews, we will consider positive depictions of humanity's future in art, literature, movies, and media. And we will issue kindness challenges each week. Give an update about Our Future is Kind, the company, and what it's doing to stay true to its mission. So, let's dive in. Welcome, everybody. We have a very special episode today with Mari Ribeiro. She is a globe-trotting entrepreneur, coach. She is just a spectacular, glowing spirit. And I know her because she is my trademark attorney. At least that's how I think of you, other than as this wise sage who helps me out in so many ways. But Mari, welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Michael, thank you so much. I have to say, I so appreciate you inviting me to be on your podcast. It is such an honor just to be able to contribute to your platform because I love what you're doing. I love your messaging, and I'm so excited to contribute to the conversation. So thank you. Like you mentioned, my name is Mari Ribeiro. I was known as a traveling trademark lawyer, and I make sure that nobody can copy or steal your brand. And I do travel full time. I'm currently based out of Dubai, United Arab Emirates, which I'm at right now. And I'm just so excited to just share some tidbits around kindness and what the future is going to look like as it relates to kindness. So thank you again, Michael.
So glad to have you here. And I know that you're going to have some of the best answers. So I'm hoping everybody's really tuning in. You have out your notepads. You can sit down and jot down notes about what Mari has to say. So the big goal of Our Future is Kind podcast is to define what does the future look like if it is a kind future. And so I want you to just tell us, what do you think? I mean, you've been in so many places, as you said, in Dubai and in America. Like, what are your thoughts? What should the future of humanity be?
That is such a loaded question. I think you can attack it from so many different angles. But I have to say, one of the things that my travels have really imparted on me is really two things that I think are fundamentals as it relates to kindness. And the first thing that I'm going to say is curiosity. I think it's so important to just be curious about the situation, about the person, about the culture in a very genuine type of way so that it'll lead you to start asking questions. And with those questions, the second component would be coming from a place of understanding. And I think when we have this foundational understanding and desire to understand the person on the other side of the table, the person sitting next to us, the situation that we are, moving through, if we're coming from a place of understanding, I think kindness just naturally follows from having curiosity, wanting to understand, and then kindness is almost like the result of those two things. I've really found that curiosity and understanding has served me so well as I was traveling full time. I'm originally from Miami. I've lived my whole life in America, and I've traveled a lot when I was growing up. Like I learned how to walk on an airplane to like Ohio or something like that. And a few years ago, I decided to travel full time because it's just something that my heart really had this desire to do. And as I was traveling around, I was just in awe with so much of different backgrounds, understandings, culture, food, intellectuals. I mean, one of the things that would like really surprise me is when I would step outside of America, the way that people would engage with each other in different cultures was just so fascinating to me. And it was one of those things that I was like, I have to start picking this up because, as you're traveling, one of the wonderful things is that you get to experience so many different things and you get to keep what you like, kind of like souvenirs, and then you kind of get to let go of what, okay, that's interesting, but doesn't really resonate with me. And so one of the things that I really, really gravitated towards was just seeing how people relate to each other coming from different cultures. And I noticed that one of the things that was just a theme was just this curiosity. And I noticed that when I, being an expat, was having the opportunity to experience these new cultures, and when I approached the new culture with curiosity, I was received so much better than if I didn't show any kind of curiosity, if I didn't really ask questions, if I didn't really, say, well, what do you mean by that? Or how does that work? How does that actually relate to this? Just asking these curious questions, which you never really know if it's going to serve you or not. But the fact that I was just curious about other people's culture, it would really let people open up to me and blossom. I would see them blossom because there's a saying that says everyone's favorite subject is themselves. And I noticed that when you kind of show an interest in the other person, it almost melts away any kind of barriers that you might have between each other. And there's more of a willingness to share, to collaborate, to be open, to communicate, to educate, and to invite people in. So I would definitely say curiosity really has found to be beneficial, which then leads to understanding, and then kindness can just naturally flow.
That is absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you can still hear me or not. I had to switch microphones. But that's an absolutely beautiful answer, and it is so parallel to how I love to think. We are all voyagers here on this planet Earth together, and we're lucky to be here at all. And so the part of the zest, part of the excitement of life is learning about other people and then celebrating with them in their mode, in their culture. I mean, there's so many foods and so many languages, and there's different art and music and dance, and I love it all. So it's a beautiful answer. I think curiosity really is the linchpin for showing other people that you are trying to hear them and you are trying to see them, and that is the basis of kindness. So I love that.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure that in your travels and in your work as an attorney, you've encountered all kinds of people and you've seen all kinds of situations. You've had situations related back to you that other people have experienced. What are some of the most unkind and what are some of the kindest situations that you have heard of? I mean, feel free to grab hold of just any, positive, any big struggles. I want to hear just like what are some things that stick in your mind and in your heart from your travels or from your helping other people?
That's an amazing question. I remember that when I was actually in university, there was a friend of mine that she had this. This is kind of where the idea of kindness kind of started sticking with me, is that she had this initiative called Random Acts of Kindness. And it was, I don't know if it was like a monthly thing or something, but it was something that really promoted the people at the university to express their kindness without there being a motive, maybe even with strangers, which I thought was really interesting because it also required some courage, to express this kindness with someone that you don't know. And I just remember her being so passionate about it. And it really helped to kind of ask yourself, how can I show up to be more kind to people? How can I lend a hand? And it's so funny. I was actually having a conversation yesterday with a really good friend of mine, and I was expressing to him, he was kind of talking about reconnecting with an old friend, but he wasn't necessarily sure if he should reach out because so much time had passed by, and he was kind of in a position where he was looking for guidance, right? And he was looking for maybe a new change of career, maybe a different path in his profession. And because those two things coincided, he was very hesitant to reconnect with someone that had mattered to him in his life. And I remember explaining to him, just because you're also in need doesn't devalue the showing interest in another person's life and asking, how are things for you? Again, it's going with that curiosity, just taking an interest in someone else. And I specifically told him, you just never know how meaningful that question could be for someone who's also a professional, where it's like, we tend to be very robotic, especially when it comes to white collar professionals where, we have to be very serious and it has to be all business and very straight to the point, which, by the way, is super American. When you're in other cultures, it doesn't work like that. People really do want to work with those that they know and that they like and that they trust, and they start knowing about your family and your hobbies. And it's very common to relate to people in a very personal manner, even before a conversation around business can take place. Otherwise, it just feels very mechanical. And so, in America, we're very straight to the point, especially when COVID came around, when Zoom really was taking over. Because I remember when I would have my initial consultations and I would invite the potential client to come to my office, I would sit for hours with them. I would sit for an hour, 2 hours, again, to make them feel comfortable to want to work with me. And then when Zoom came along, where it was more like, okay, our meeting starts at 3 p.m. At 3 p.m. we're on here and let's get right to business, because we want to get off of Zoom and we want to go back onto the couch, or we want to go back into, whatever it is that we were doing in a less things that we weren't doing in the office. Let's just put it that way. And so I think it even instilled a more structured way of doing business. But I really realized that the kindness goes a long way. And it's as simple as just saying, let's just put the business aside for a moment. How are you doing? How's your family? Have you been getting rest? Just taking an interest in the person, because you think that you buy from a business, but really you buy from the person. And that's really what the personal branding is all about, which is why I love doing the trademarking, because I really do get to put protections around the brand. But when you peel back the layers, it really is about the person, especially when you are in a service-based industry like you and like me. And I just think that nowadays, when we're in such a hurry to close the deal and get things done, we live in this like very transactional type of professional environment where we're all just looking to close and move on to the next thing. Taking a beat and a step back and asking, how are you doing? How can I support you? It goes so long. And there's a quote that I really love, where people won't remember what you did for them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And it just shows that, like, we are human beings and we're so connected to our own emotional structure that when someone elevates our emotions or they disrupt our emotions, we remember it. We absolutely remember it. And so if you know that that's a fact, that that's an experience that we're all likely to have, why not choose to impart something that elevates or that lightens the other person through the use of kindness, simply just by asking, how are you? And genuinely meaning it, genuinely asking, how are you? What's going on in your world? What's new? What's old? What's the same? What has been in transition for you? Is there somewhere that like I can support you in some way? And you just never really know how far, just ask, even if they don't need anything, you never know how far just asking, how can I support you, in a very kind and genuine way, how far that can go for another person.
It's so meaningful. I think you've hit right on the thread of how I like to think, which is business is a set of people trying to engage with each other to help support each other, to help supply each other with something that the other would need, but it's always people. It's people, people, people. And so the idea that you would somehow disengage the human from the end goals of a business, I don't know how you even do that. I love the fact that you bring that up. If you had to give advice to corporate leaders, to anybody who's a solopreneur, anybody who is out there trying to engage with other people, what are any of the strategies that you have for just keeping it real, staying kind, and making sure that they feel that support and that love? Because I know you're very, very good at it. But what are your strategies for other people who are watching or listening in?
I love this question too. I swear, Michael, you just have really great questions. Um, I feel that sometimes kindness um, can be mainly seen as an outward manifestation, as an act that you do outwardly. And I'm a big proponent that you cannot give to others which you do not give to yourself first. And so, especially for entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, they tend to have this mentality that the client comes first, that your employees come first, that your vendors come first, your family comes first, everybody comes first, and then last is the entrepreneur. I mean, how many times do we know of situations where the entrepreneur gets paid last? They pay their bills first, they pay their vendors first, they pay their employees first, they pay everybody else first, and then they pay themselves last. And I think that is a misguide. It's rooted in a good place, right? Because we're taught to kind of put others ahead of ourselves. But I take issue with that ideology, because I really do think that the first relationship that you have is with yourself, and that the everything else is following that relationship. So it's really hard to be kind to others when you don't show kindness to yourself. And one of the ways that I do this is prioritizing myself. And a lot of times our society kind of makes it seem like it's selfish, as selfish is like a dirty word. But like, I love the word being selfish, and I wish people would be more aggressive with being selfish, because then I think it would take the responsibility off of everybody else to take care of everybody else if we were first kind to ourselves, if we were first prioritizing ourselves. And then it's so much easier for everything else to just overflow, and then everybody else gets the overflow because we're whole. And so one of the ways that I would really encourage entrepreneurs and CEOs and people in leadership positions, whether it be in business or their community or in their family, would be to start the day with themselves first. So really having some solitude. I had a business coach that she would call this quietude, quiet and solitude time put together, so that you can just kind of sit in stillness and be with yourself and give to yourself whatever it is that you need before you can show up for anybody else. So before I start my day, I'm an audio learner, so I love listening to podcasts and things like that. So I listen to one of my spiritual advisors first thing in the morning. That's the first thing I put on. Before I even brush my teeth, I'm putting on a spiritual advisor that I love to listen to. And then I'm doing my breath work. And then I am journaling, not every day, but I do journal. And then I'm reading something. So I really am pouring into myself first before I am in a position to then offer grace and offer kindness to anybody else. It just makes it so much easier in order to do it that way.
Well, it seems obvious to me, and I'm sure to everybody who is listening in or watching, that you are whole and you are spilling out all of that energy and uplift. So I appreciate that very much. And I can't agree with you more. When I don't take care of myself, it becomes really obvious to everyone else, but also to myself. I know that I'm not doing the right things for me. So this morning I went for a walk around this little water feature in this park that's nearby, and it was so cold, but it was so nice. It was me walking with me and contemplating life, and yeah. So I love that idea that people can mix that into their profession, into their business, into their interactions, but it starts with self. So beautiful. Love that.
And I have to say, it doesn't look like any one particular thing. I mean, and it could be very simple as going for a walk, as drinking a glass of water with lemon. You know, it could be so simple, but it's so meaningful. And this is also when you are alone, you can really get to discover yourself and your uniqueness and your unique needs, because what I need is different from what you need is different from the next person. And so, you know, that's another thing that I would also encourage people is that it doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It doesn't even have to be in the morning. If you're not a morning person, it could be a night routine that you do. It could just be, you know, it could be so simple, but it's almost sacred. It's a sacred ritual. It's a sacred time that you get to really invest and pour into yourself. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's way of doing this, because we're all unique. Even the way that we express kindness is very unique. It could be, you know, a hug. It could be a verbal affirmation. It could be taking a responsibility off of someone else's plate that day. It could be giving a gift. There's so many different ways of being kind, and there's so many different ways of pouring into yourself first as well.
I'm loving this conversation.
Yeah.
You are capturing what I think a lot of folks in our audience are thinking about. You know, like, how do I do this? And so, giving everybody here permission. You know, hopefully you're still taking notes of what Mari is saying, but um, definitely realize that you have the power to bestow kindness upon yourself. And so, starting there sounds like a great strategy. I love it. Mari, when you are engaged in just entertainment, just, you know, taking in the world, what are some things that you look to inspire you to think about, well, the world should look more like this? I want the world to be more of this thing. Is it music? Is it literature? Is it a TV show that you watch, a book that you read? You mentioned spiritual advisors, so just anything that gets you going.
Yeah, so I am forever a student. So I love learning. I love, especially about things in the esoteric realm, and all things, you know, that have to do with spirituality and personal development. Currently, I'm actually reading a book about trust, by Osho, who is, he's an older Indian mystic. And I have to say that, you know, even though there's a whole world of woo-woo spirituality and all kinds of stuff, and it can be very inviting, it can also be extremely challenging, because a lot, like for example, in this book that I'm reading, a lot of the things that he's talking about is extremely idealistic around trust, around trust not being dependent on the person next to you or the person in front of you in which you're relating, but a characteristic that you own regardless of what's happening to you, or in your experience. And so these kinds of concepts really challenge the stories that we've been told of what trust is. Though they have to earn your trust, you know, these kinds of topics. It's a challenge and it's a stretch, but that is why, you know, we like to learn and we like to consume these things. So I definitely love reading spirituality, books around spirituality, and these fundamental type of characteristics that we all want to embody. And then the other way that I love is, again, I'm an audio learner, so I love listening to podcasts. Not so much in spirituality, but more about like in the business realm, is The Diary of a CEO. I love this podcast a ton. And then I also am such a student of the law of attraction, and you get what you think about. And so it's really helped to shift my perspective and to shift my mindset. And that has been through the teachings of Esther Hicks. So she's the one that I listen to first thing in the morning. I have her on YouTube nonstop. She has these nice little excerpts that are like 15 minutes, which I'm such a fan of. And then in a more structured, religious type of space, I love listening to Joel Osteen. I just love his sermons. They're always exactly what I need to hear. So I just love consuming those types of spiritual advisors, because they don't just inspire me in the mind and to change the way I think about things, but they just inspire my heart as well. And it's just so much easier to show up and be kind when you fed yourself and you feel nourished spiritually and internally in your heart.
Lovely. Yeah. So you feed yourself through audio and through anything that feeds your heart and your being. And then
Yeah.
and then you go forth into the world, and how do you project, like, making the world into what you want it to be? How do you see yourself in the world, I guess, is what I'm asking.
That's a hard question. I think I'm ever evolving the way in which I participate and show up in the world. They always say that if you're not growing, you're dying. So,
Yeah.
with this evolution, um, it's almost like I'm also discovering myself as others are discovering me too.
Mhm.
And it kind of takes pressure off of me to be like, I don't have to know exactly how every day or every moment of every day is going to look like. But it also leads to curiosity again. And then I would also say that I have also learned that in order for me to really embody a concept like kindness, I need to study it in the mind. So I need to study it theoretically. So reading your book was super helpful, which I totally recommend. But like understanding kindness in like a very theoretical, logical perspective is one way in which I learn something. But then to really bring it home is by practicing it, is by saying, okay, I learned this in a book. I learned this in Michael's book. Let me see if there's an opportunity that will show up in which I can actually practice the theory that I just studied. So I actually need to learn things theoretically, like as a student, reading it, listening to it, maybe rewriting it, but studying it. And then I actually need to practice it. I need to embody it. And this is also where kindness um, can be imparted on yourself, where you may not get it right the first time. You may not approach the situation the way that you thought you would when you're learning it in theory, but it's also giving yourself that grace to make mistakes, to learn, oh, okay, I could have done that better. Or you know what, maybe I need to go back and call that person and explain what I really meant when I used that tone that I could have maybe, been a little bit less harsh and more kind, right? So I think it's kind of really going like approaching something logically, studying it like as a student, but then also inviting the opportunities for you to actually embody and practice what it is that you're learning, and then giving yourself permission to mess it up to mess it up, and allowing those around you as well to say, oh wow, she's not perfect, he's not perfect, but I'm going to extend grace to them too, because I also feel that when we receive kindness, we 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 feel this sensation of almost being loved, where especially if someone is, allowing us to make a mistake and then gently guiding us to the right direction, um, or even just offering forgiveness to us and not holding a grudge. There's so many different ways that kindness can be expressed. But even when we're in the receiving place of having kindness put upon us, again, it's just like this seed that just kind of blooms, and then we can't wait for an opportunity to pay that forward or pay that back. Um, so yeah, I would just say give ourselves some grace, as we are figuring it out how we are showing up in the world.
Yeah, forgiveness is definitely a touchstone for me as well. If you've ever heard of Kristen Hadid, she wrote an amazing book called Permission to Screw Up. Such a good book, so wonderful because it really does touch on some of these same themes that you're raising here, and I just love how you talk about kindness pouring into you and then trying to practice it and have it pour back out of you. So that's lovely. I can't believe that our time has already blown by. And so I want you to tell everybody, what are you working on these days? What are the ways that people can find you, interact with you? How would you love for people to reach out to you to learn more?
Sure. So I'm currently really focusing on showing up for people as a coach, offering them wisdom, offering them guidance, offering them support in addition to being their trademark lawyer and helping them protect their brand from being copied or stolen. But the best way to reach out to me is on Instagram. It is Mari, Mari _ trademarks. That's plural. You can always send me a DM. I'm happy to respond and engage with you and your audience on Instagram.
Fantastic. All right. Mari, thank you so much for being on Our Future is Kind. I know that if we could just leave a lot of it up to you, and some of it is up to you, our world is going to be kinder. Our future is going to be kinder. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Michael, thank you for the work that you are doing, because we need it. We really do. We are in such an interesting time where there's so many different moving parts, and some of it is new and unknown, and some of it can be scary, and some of it is really joyful. But your work is really important. It's really necessary, especially for the younger generation. And I know that you're focused in the corporate setting with C-suite leaders and the corporate world. And that's also where kindness can really thrive in business. It really can thrive. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Well, it's a team sport, so I'm glad to be on the same team. All right. Well, thank you
Agreed.
again. And listeners, please check out the show notes because everything that Mari mentioned about how to find her, about the book that she mentioned, about the podcast that she was talking about, all of that will be in our show notes. So thank you again, Mari.
Thank you, Michael. Can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Bye.
This episode's Kindness Challenge. When you meet someone new or run into somebody you've seen a million times and have just never talked to you before, follow Mari's advice and get curious. Try conversation openers, practice them over and over again, and when you meet them, you'll have the right thing to say. When somebody replies, genuinely listen and ask follow-up questions. If they reveal something rough is going on in their lives, ask, do you have the support you need? And be empathetic. If you need to work your way up to that challenge, try this first. Reach out to 3 people you already know by text, email, a FaceTime call, and just start asking how they are, what's going on in their lives, and emphasize how important they are to you. The challenge here is that they should be 3 people you haven't talked to in over a year. So maybe a teacher, a former colleague, a cousin you rarely see. When you conquer this step, then try the harder one with the people you don't really know. Want to get inspired to do kind things? Well, check out some of the things that Mari recommended that get her going. Things like books by Osho. Meditation for Busy People is one good example. There's a podcast called The Diary of a CEO, and the different recordings of Joel Osteen, Thanks again for listening to our Future is Kind podcast, a podcast in search of a kinder future. Go out there and do something kind.